I mean, that's as good as a reason as any to say welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I am continuing the awkward introduction phase of the podcast that Andy started, who is sitting right next to myself, Andy Cleff. How are you?
I'm doing great.
How do you feel about making things more awkward on the podcast for listeners? Do you feel like it's been good for us?
I like it. I think that, cold open stuff, it's getting all the views.
We are trying more YouTube stuff. If you're one of those YouTubers, the oldest of our crew, Andy being the most like social media like heavy board member was I did not have in the office pool. I will say that. We will stop talking because we have a guest with us. Let's act right, people. The Agile dude was way overdue for a visit. We haven't talked to him in a while. Jason Little, what
How's it
up,
going?
brother? I feel like I'm obliged to make some joke about a defensive man or something that Ryan Lockard would want me to make fun of some player on your team with skates. I don't watch the sport, so I'll pretend to.
Oh, okay. Any Edmonton Oiler joke would work. So the fact that they choke every playoffs, even though at the beginning of the season they're going to win the cup just because they have Connor. But we always finish higher than Philly, so I guess he can't. There's not much he can chirp on.
I think for most of the sporting community, it doesn't matter the sport. The goal is to finish higher than Philly. In a completely different sport, my team is also in a battle with Philly to finish higher. So,
yep.
So that one was for you, Ryan Lockard. I dare you to listen. So, Andy,
Yes,
what are we
sir.
talking about today?
So the Grand Poobah of Lean Change published something, and we'll include a link in the show notes if we can still figure out how to do that. It was an intriguing clickbaity title. It was well done. 4 old school agile mantras that change agents should be stealing. So that's going to be the skeleton or the bones of the conversation. We'll dive
I just
into
love that you just accused Jason of being clickbaity.
Well, it worked. I opened it. So you started. It's somewhere where it might even be the first sentence. So I'm going to give you a direct quote and then ask you what you were thinking, and then we can unpack this. I think it's a good assumption to say that when Agile started to become a big business, somewhere around 2012, the intention was lost.
Yep.
What the hell happened in 2012?
Well, that seems to be the time when Agile became less about the intention and coming from a software background, and it became a way for people to print money. Like that's when you started seeing the frameworks and Biff's certification emporium spinning up and all this other kind of stuff. And free enterprise, whatever, who cares? Do what you want.
Shots fired at Biff.
Yeah, but that seems to be the point where it started getting watered down, and it became more about the right side of the manifesto instead of the left. You know what I mean? Like it became about the processes and the best practices, and then late majority started picking up on agile stuff and started turning it into frameworks and step-by-step magic bullets and all the stuff that it was not the intention, I think.
Sold well. I'm reading Jim Highsmith's book, Wild West to Agile, and
Yeah,
I'm about 3/4 of the way through. Chris, you're reading it too. He's broken things down into time chunks based on his view of where he was, technology, and he's calling the period from 25 to 2010 the courageous period. And I'm in that chapter, and he's describing the lead up to an Agile Dev conference, which was at the 10th anniversary of the Agile Manifesto. So it was 2011. And he was on the organizing committee, and it was the first instance of the executive forum theme. And the catchword was, now is the time for enterprise agility. And maybe that was it. Like 2011, people like, oh, this Agile thing's sticking around. Dean launched Safe in 2011 and Safe version 1, 2012. But it filled a need somewhere.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Well,
Because
that
people
was
snapped
around
it
the
up.
time the Enterprise Scrum, his name just left me. He's no longer with us. But that's, the idea of enterprising, the enterprisizing of things or whatever is, it does seem to me, I love that Jason said the quiet part out loud, which is basically like, we've all been saying it for years, but I feel like the atmosphere is ready to start saying like, hey, the heart of what the manifesto was hoping to achieve doesn't really jive with making a lot of money, because the things that get people to make a lot of money tend to enforce things that may lean more to the right side. And I'm not saying the right side is bad, but if we're still going by the manifesto, we say that we prefer things on the left more than the right, then why does all the things on the right include how we make money? Like, does that mean agility is just meant for paupers? Like, I don't know. I just wanted to use the word pauper in a sentence.
Oh, that's good. That's good use. Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody's got to make a buck, and that's probably the I remember when everybody was attacking certifications and stuff, and I remember a lot of the responses from people that offer those, that was their reason, right? Like, everybody's got to make a buck. Well, yeah, you do have to make a buck, but you're making a choice. So let's not pretend that the glut of stuff on LinkedIn and all the marketing things forced you into having to put your values and principles aside to pursue money. You made a choice. Stop blaming the industry for it. And I've made a choice to not do stuff like that. I don't do certifications. I don't, do any of that stuff, because for me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the practitioners are making choices to stay in that enterprise space and to make Agile more about process and to make it more about obedience and compliance and standards and all that kind of stuff. And then they complain when it doesn't work. So what do I don't even remember how that post came to be. I think the original title was 4 things that Agile change bandwagon jumpers haven't stolen yet. Because the change has been, my world for greater part of the last 20 years. And we're out of things to pillage. I mean, you guys have seen this with Agile, right? Like, first it was about software, and then it was like, oh, we could steal something from business requirements, and we can steal something from, let's steal some HR ideas, let's steal some org change ideas, let's do Agile for management, let's do Agile for whatever. So now I think the only thing we haven't touched yet is Agile for board members. That hasn't become popular, but some people are talking about it. Once that's taken, what's left? It's like this amorphous blob that just keeps eating stuff.
No, let's tug on that thread. Agile for board members. So we can't do T-shirts and certs, but we could do bow ties.
This is how it starts.
Yeah.
We could do bow ties. We could do ascots. We could do kind of great things there. So your old school mantras. Let's explore them. As I read it, what you wrote, I think your frame was largely teen levels, but I want to challenge us to see if we can take those old school mantras and apply them at scale.
Ooh.
So you want to take the first one? YAGNI.
So the first one was YAGNI, right? Yeah. So I did a little spin on how those things would relate to change, because I see this a lot with people coming from, I guess, what you would call traditional change and wanting to kick the tires on using Agile in change is kind of how they phrase it. And for them, it becomes, because the stakeholder asked for it, I have to do it. So it's very much, change gets dropped through the hole in the floor from the top, and the change agents pick it up and they see it as an order. Oh, they ordered a burger with cheese and bacon, which is obviously delicious. And they're going to go and fulfill that order because the stakeholder said so. So YAGNI is more about, if you're using that as a mantra, how do you get to the heart of what they want? Because no stakeholder I've ever worked with wants a year or 18-month roadmap of all the steps for a change. Those might be the words coming out of their mouth, but they really just want to know that you got your shit together and you're thinking about stuff. They never look at the plans, and they don't want that. They want some feeling of certainty that we're headed in the right direction and you know what you're doing. So if you use that as a mantra, strip out all the stuff that doesn't matter. Unless you're in a highly regulated field, you don't need all of these documents and things that change agents tell me that they spend so much time on, but nobody ever gets value out of it. So use that to figure out what is it that I actually really need so I can make this change go one step forward.
Yeah, that lines up, Jason, with a conversation Andy and I had a couple weeks ago about simplicity, right? So this notion of simplification of things. And for the record, that's a really complex topic. Is like simplicity is truly stripping away things that are unnecessary and just say, hey, you're not going to need that, right? Like that, which is at the heart of what YAGNI gets to, is like, why are we dealing with stuff that we don't need right here and now when there is, because you take this idea, the first thing that everybody wants to know is, how does it scale? Like Andy asked that at the very, like he just said, let's try to scale your cool ideas. I'm not saying Andy's a terrible person. I'm just insinuating that he's a terrible person, but he is saying, like, so why is this such a hard concept for us to get, Jason?
Well, maybe Andy's creating a new YAGNI at scale certification, and that's because everything's harder at scale. It just takes more time. Try to get have a party with 3 people and try to decide on pizza toppings. It'll take a little bit. Now have 10 people at your party. It'll take a little bit more. It's the same thing with scale. As soon as you get at scale, you've got mismatched objectives. You've got people who are busy with their day jobs, and trying to maintain the links between all these groups that need to be involved in this decision just gets harder. So instead of dealing with trying to manage that, we just try to create a process and force people to use it, because we don't have to interact with these 1,000 people or whatever it is.
Right. And then the ask comes, can we set up another meeting, ceremony, et cetera, cadence to manage the complexity? Can we set up another reporting system? Chris, you and I talked about, well, something went bad once and now there's a mandated report every week to make sure that that never happens again. So I think it comes out of a fear of being able to say, no, you don't need that. I know you want a roadmap, and I understand that's to check that we're good and we know our shit, but how about we tackle it some other way?
Yeah. Well, yes. When you scale things, the way that modern consulting has taught us is the easiest way to scale things is just make it modular, meaning like, and what Jason is touching on is that human thoughts and things that happen in between our brains are almost impossible to modularize, right? You can modularize tech stacks, you can modularize coding practices, you can modularize testing practices and code coverages and tools and things that those are non-human things, right? The challenge is when you try to scale human things, we are not modularizable, right? Like that's the ultimate challenge with you're not going to need it, is like, I don't know how else to tell you. Yes, you may need that over in that other part of the business. You may need that over there. You may need this here, there, but not everywhere, because unfortunately humans just aren't scalable in the human ways, right? No matter what OpenAI tells us.
Yeah. A good example is one company I did some work with. I guess you could call them medium-sized, about 6,000 people or so. And when we had our big program portfolio wall, where all the decisions for programs happened in one room, we would get, I don't know, anywhere between 25 and 35 people in our portfolio level stand-ups, basically to synchronize work. It was like our air traffic control. Right. And when you talk about YAGNI, this was in a regulated environment. So we just invited the auditors and the regulators, and we said, this is our single source of truth. Whatever you need to make to satisfy whatever you need to satisfy, go do it. Like, we're not going to do it for you. We're not going to push it on you. But if you want to know what's going on, come to this room every Monday at 9 o'clock and then do whatever you want. If you want help doing other stuff over there, we'll help you, but we're not going to. So you leave the control to the people who have to deal with whatever consequence that is leading you to think that you have to, well, what if we should make a process, because what if these people have to report Freedom of Information Act? Oh, what if that group needs to do that? Then let them do it. Who gives a shit? Just provide a place for a single source of truth and support them to go do it. Right. If they do it or they don't, it makes really no difference to me as the Agile coach or the change person. I'm just providing a linking mechanism to carry information between groups, and these groups can decide how they want to adapt their process or create something.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. Next mantra is last responsible moment. So this is one of those principles that like everybody can say they know what it means, but what do you feel like people get least about the last responsible moment, Jason?
I think they think it means, or the behavior suggests that we can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we want whenever we want with no consequence.
Which would be nice.
Which is kind of crazy. I mean, Johanna Rothman talks about this a lot. She talks about it in her portfolio books. There's a shutdown cost, and there's a task switching cost, and there's a cost to changing requirements late in the game. That's still a last responsible moment, but you have to have a conversation about the consequence of that action. So right. Usually I actually just talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago about this, who's doing like a 3-year long big system rollout. And how do we satisfy the stakeholders' need for the training plan? I'm like, you don't even have the vendor picked yet. Like, why are you even talking about, you're going to have to do training. So just stick it in the backlog and deal with it later. You don't have to decide on a vendor. You don't have to decide on a training platform. Something's going to happen later. So save that decision for down the road. So I like to ask people, how important is it to make this decision right now? What's the consequence of that? What's the alternative?
Right. And
then let them again decide, because it's last responsible moment is, you never know when it's the right moment. After the fact. So you can be like, shit, we should have did this 2 weeks ago. Oh, well, we learned, now let's do it. But it's a paradox, if you want to call it that.
Andy, did you catch that? Like I mean, the key to unlocking that is that nobody really honestly can say they are for sure this is the last responsible moment. So Andy, how do we help people get something that you don't really know until it almost when the moment's passed?
Right. And then you're like, oh shit, that there it goes. There goes the bus. That's a good question.
So all right. So if we're like, which also at scale, like the scaling aspect of, or at least the enterprise-wide aspect of this, is this idea of like what decisions need to be centralized versus decentralized, right? Like that's one thing that I'm, we can say whatever we want about any of the scaling frameworks, but there's a few of them that do call out like, some things just can't be decentralized. I get that we want to empower teams as best we can, but if you want the last responsible moment to be scalable, I am not letting you make a decision that's going to cost us a lot of time or money without putting my name on it, because that's what I took the job for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's setting the right constraint.
Right. And that's contextual, right? What flight level you're on, what are the cadences, and then what is you talked about it, the threshold to commit, right? Mm-hmm. When do we actually have to make that decision? And if we keep things smaller, I think we get more wiggle room. Talk about bat sizes being smaller and less whip. You have more flexibility. You have a bigger band of responsible moment.
Mm-hmm.
So by creating a buffer, whatever buffers you can, right? I'm not saying you like, and what, so, and just for the record, Andy is not saying, hey, I'm going to call every 5 and 8 in Fibonacci scoring because I want to create a buffer. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that there is a window to allow yourself. It's not like if we don't decide in the next 10 minutes, that's not the way that decisions normally work, right? But you can add some length or some runway to your quote unquote responsible moment if you think responsibly about, as opposed to just going, I want. And I'm not the one paying the cost, so I'm happy to tell people to work nights and weekends. So it's not going to be me doing it. Like, I'm okay paying that cost. Like, that doesn't cost me anything additional to tell people. Everybody's salary, they're going to be working all weekend anyways. Like, if it gets what I want, like, cool. Like, well, it's not what we're saying. That's not what we're going towards, right? So, I mean, is there a way to learn, Jason, a better way to give yourself more buffer in your responsible moment?
I'm not sure there's a way to give yourself more of a buffer. I think it comes down to how the strength of the people who are tasked with making those decisions. And when you think of like large scale product development, the decision, well, we've been doing this forever, go, no go meetings and talking about the consequence of no go.
Right.
Talking about the consequence of go, or things like I just did a release last week for the startup I'm working for. We do every 3 weeks we do a call with all of our customers, and that's our roadmap. Like, we don't have a roadmap. We have a list of things that we think are a pretty good idea, but those customer sessions drive what the roadmap is, and we release every week. So our constraint is every week we release. And it's really, really small features. So I released one feature that is, you could call it 80% done, but it satisfies the most important need for them. And I saved the 20% that I'm actually going to release this Friday. So, but I think being upfront about that. So all of our customers know we release every week. You guys drive the backlog. When it's in production and you try it out, your feedback is going to help us evolve it. So we're not focused on trying to get it right by putting too much in and creating too many constraints. We're trying to make sure we understand the problem well enough. And more often than not, the customers don't know what the problem is till they start using it. Then they go, oh, well, it would be helpful if there was a checkbox here for this instead of having to go to a new screen. Awesome. Like, we could have went through a week of prototyping or 2 weeks of prototyping and back and forth and all this type of stuff. But, I can release every minute if I wanted to. We've just built it in a way that we can do stuff really, really fast. So I think as long as you have that conversation and you have people that know how to handle those decisions and accept the consequence of it and manage upwards strongly,
right?
You can learn your way to what style is going to work the most in your context, I think. But I don't know if there's really a way to solve the last responsible problem because it is so contextual.
Sure.
All right, number 3. We can call it walking the dog to be politically correct and avoid the earlier terminology. Expand on that a little bit.
This is the tracer bullet one, right?
You're translating for us. Yes.
Oh, no, you said it. Yes.
Well, I'm just reading I'm reading the way that he wrote it, Andy.
All right. Sorry for taking editorial license.
Well, you can't blame me for it. You have to blame the authors who
That's fair. That's fair. I honestly, this was not a concept that I was ultimately the most familiar with out of all of this is probably the one I was least familiar with. So I guess, how would you describe this for the uninitiated like myself, Jason?
Well, in software, the intention was you de-risk your architecture and your technology stack by doing a total end-to-end feature through your entire technology stack. So you don't build by layer, you don't separate by function. You find one feature that can touch through your whole system, and then you learn really fast how good or not good your design and architecture is the Reader's Digest version. And change, it was kind of a similar idea because, especially with big system rollouts, the pattern I see the most is it's done in phases. Phase 1, gather all the requirements from everybody, lock it down, sign off on it, go away, build all of the front end parts, or sorry, build the data model first is what I've seen mostly for these big things, is get the data model right and then build everything on top of it, because now the data people and architects have moved on to the next project, so they can't come back and change anything. And we kind of follow that path, and then we unleash it on everybody and try to train them on it. So the idea of the tracer bullet is, which I did with one of the cities here, it was a 3-year-long program, but we released by business function, if you want to call it that. So we created a big perspective map of all the groups and departments, and then all of the functions that were getting built to replace a manual paper-based system. And we picked one slice that affected, 20% of the teams. And boom, did that, and then layered on the rest after the fact. So instead of these big bang rollouts, is how can you do it incrementally? And the argument against that obviously is rework.
Right.
You are going to have rework in software no matter what.
Yeah. So I love the alternate way of walking the dog through the woods, right? Finding your way and figuring out what's lurking in the shadows.
Yeah.
And that the concept that Dave Thomas and Andy Hunt put out about working through your tech stack that way is beautiful. I want to swing it around to working through the cultural and behavioral changes that come with transformation of the ways of working, right? What are the equivalent signals in the walking the dog for cultural aspects, shifting mindset, shifting behaviors?
I like using a gigantic ripples diagram, or maybe you just call it a mind map or whatever it is. So organizations typically don't know how this agile transformation, digital transformation, cultural transformation, whatever you want to call it, they don't know how that thing is going to evolve until they live with it for 12 to 18 months, and they go through all of their regular ceremonies and rituals, and they find out where things work and don't work. Yeah. So, companies that start an agile transformation I don't know if anybody's still doing annual planning, but I come across a couple here and there that
they still do.
Every August we've got our $45 million, we've earmarked all the money, we've created all the programs, and one of our programs is an agile transformation we're going to start in September. And I go, that's not a good time to do it, because you've already pre-committed to work the old way for the next 12 to 18 months. It's just not going to work. I've turned down 3 that come to mind where I've just flat out told them, I said, it's going to be too hard. Right. What's going to happen when you want people to do the right thing for the customer, but you've committed $12 million to their portfolio? They're going to get that $12 million spent no matter what. So walking the dog is make a ritual inventory of all the, every quarter, some companies I know, they do their mass layoffs and mass hiring, lay off a bunch of people to hit the numbers, hire them back the next day. I worked for one company that did reorgs every January just for something to do. No intent behind it. So everybody knew this was a regular ritual and ceremony. There's the planning, there's the performance reviews, there's the calibration, there's budgeting. Walk the dog through those things and think about how this transformation is going to touch those.
Right.
Just to give you an idea of what to expect.
I also love, I think about one of the very first things that you wrote, Jason, that I remember resonating with me earlier on in my journey was this notion of remodeling your a part of your house, like a basement, right? You get an idea about what it looks like, but then as soon as you start peeling back the walls, you realize there's wood rot in there. I mean, you kind of put a lot of those different ideas of you don't know until you've gotten started where the problems are you going to have. So when you're building change canvases with people, the easiest way to walk the dog for me is I need a cross-functional group of people that touch every aspect of the business. I need marketing and finance in the room. I need HR in the room. I need business. I need IT. I need someone that can speak to the C-suite. It doesn't have to be everybody in, but the easiest way to send that tracer through the entire system, everything that's going to affect lead time was to have everybody that could affect lead time in the room when we talk about these ideas. And then we go, how's that idea going to land? Like that, you will see, that's when you start seeing like, oh, we peeled back this wall and there's such and such behind the sheetrock and whatever and stuff, right? Like that's an easily grokkable idea, no matter, I mean, for most people, right?
Yeah. You want that response, because that response, which often gets confused as resistance. So when you want to do this transformation and everybody freaks out about it, they go, oh, they're resisting. Well, no, they're not. They're trying to make sense of it. They're trying to understand how this is going to screw up their next 3 months, because they've already got that planned out. So that we have to have that conversation. We can't just blame them and try to overcome their resistance, because it's not resistance. It's just their response. So, I mean, it's exactly like that. I remember the story where I wrote that, and it was it was funny because the guy who was going to do our kitchen, he was asking about something with like pipes in one of the bulkheads or something, and he's like, well, you know, it's going to be $1,500 or it's going to be 8,000. It really depends what's back there. And he's like, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. So he just takes his hammer and he just bashes a hole in the wall, and he goes, right, it's going to be 1,500. Like, there's no, you know what I mean? So like, either way, you're fixing something. You're either fixing a big mess or you're fixing a tiny little piece of drywall.
And you're not going to know until you start.
You ain't going to know till you do it. Yeah.
I mean, that's how Andy like emotionally processes his days. He just walks around with a hammer and starts.
Yeah, the house is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, his girlfriend is not a fan of how he keeps.
Not a fan. I was just seeing what's behind the wall, honey. Maybe this is a good segue before I get into more trouble. Using yesterday's weather forecast to predict whether I need an umbrella or sunscreen for tomorrow. Let's unpack that a little bit.
And also, why is it not in vogue anymore? This was one of my favorite things to do that just I don't hear anybody talk about anymore. I mean, why don't we talk about it? Is it just because it doesn't sound as cool as it used to?
I think it's a symptom of, again, the post 2012-ish, when Agile became a big business, is most of the people you'll see talking about Agile on LinkedIn are new within 4, 5, 6 years. They don't even know these things exist because they're getting introduced. And I'm not saying this is right, wrong, whatever. They're getting introduced to Agile through big business and frameworks and training and certification and Agile plus function name kind of thing. So they've just never seen it before. Yesterday's weather, for, you know, when I talk about it and change, it's things like companies have been doing transformations over and over forever.
Right.
Like, think of any of the telecoms and banks that you guys have seen, right? They've been doing this for 10, 15 years. You can reasonably expect that when they start the next one in a couple of months, it's going to work out the same as the last one. So you start to create, how did we approach this change last time, or the last 2, 3, 4 times? What did we do and what happened? You can reasonably expect that pattern is going to happen again, no matter what happens. Usually they think the savior is some hotshot consultant or a new AVP who's going to come in, who's road tested and seasoned with Dano's spicy rub, and they're going to come in and, you know, fix it because they've done it before. Well, they can't fix shit. There's no way they can. It's unreasonable to expect a savior can come in and do that. But you can expect the organization is going to react the same way they did previously. So now you're with conscious choice. Should we do the same thing we've done for these last 5 transformation attempts, or should we fundamentally try something different? Let's talk about that consequence.
I'm as you're saying that, I'm hearing all of the reasons why when I talk to leaders, they're like, yeah, but it's some version of, yeah, but I wasn't here last time. Yeah. Right. And that's fine. Right. There are some dynamic leaders that have absolutely come in and changed organizations for the better. I don't ever want to make it seem like I don't think that's possible. Mm-hmm. However, like, geniuses are rare for a reason. And not everybody is. So, like, again, regardless of how good you are, there are systematic, and it's almost like the organizations are like living ecosystems that have immunities to major change. And the bigger the change you suggest, the more the white blood cells of the organization are going to attack it. And it doesn't matter how dynamic you are. Like, if it existed before, it's going to happen again. And that's a great way to scale yesterday's weather, is to say, hey, last time we got together and we planned a quarter of work at a time, how'd that go? Are we making consistent steps forward? Did previous quarter, did we do better than the previous one? Okay, well, that's a good yesterday's weather. Mm-hmm. That's a reason to not, throw ourselves out of a window or whatnot, right? Like, good things can happen. So it's not all doom and gloom, but if we ignore the clouds and off in the distance, I mean, it's going to rain on you sooner than you realize, and you're going to be the only one that's wet, right?
Yeah. It's the absence of that conversation, I think, that was really driving that yesterday's weather thing, because it's exactly like you said. I wasn't here last time, and ego is part of it too, because when the the hotshot consultant or the new AVP or whatever come in, they have to prove impact right away. Yep. They have to demonstrate competence and go to can do kind of attitude. So they come in and they push. And actually my first Scrum Master job, early 2000s ish, mid 2000s, something like that. We actually hired my replacement because I was on contract. So the team interviewed the replacements for me, and we actually got in a lot of shit for that because it was against HR's policy. We didn't know, and we didn't ask anyway. But she came in and she did, this is where the ritual inventory from Lead Change came from. She came in and just said, so tell me what's happened over the last year when you started with this, and literally wrote it all down. Okay, well, we've done, 23 sprints. Here's our velocity range, min, max numbers. We've done this many releases. We've done this, that, and the other, and just made a great big list and gathered up a bunch of stuff. She kind of did like a job change retrospective almost, which I thought was just freaking brilliant. So that's yesterday's weather. Now, what do you want to do for going forward? And I think if we do that when we're talking about these big transformations, it gives us a little spot to kind of stop and breathe a little bit and take stock of the past, and then go, okay, now that we've done that, now let's figure out what we want to do going forward. Yeah,
that touches on, I had a amazing conversation with Bob Galen a few weeks ago, and a lot of his writing is touching on this now, is this notion of, we're not like, getting back to basics also means getting back to like the humility of what we do. I don't think that our industry is approaching the work with the right level of humility of, there's many roads up this mountain, and I don't have one way of doing it. We have to figure it out. But it has to start with me going, it doesn't have to be done a certain way for it to be good, right? It's the same thing from a leadership perspective of like, you can't approach a transformation with one path, one road, one way, one whatever, because that's just not how humans work, right? Like, how dare I come in and say, I know the only way and I'm the only one that can do that for you, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah, Annie, what do you think?
It's competitive, and part of the people buying want to see that persona show up, the savior persona. And so to get the opportunity, sometimes you have to pitch that way. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about yesterday's weather a little more, and I think if we talk about what people are measuring, we can get some value out of that, right? So Jason, you shared the story. So we've measured velocity and the variation and so forth. That not only can lead to good things, but it can also lead to bad things. Mm-hmm. And particularly at scale, here I go again. When we start looking at weather patterns, we're measuring the wrong things. You know, they're measuring sun and cloud and rain, and in fact, maybe we should be looking at how the forest is growing, right? Is there a diversity of plants and animals and microflora? I don't know where I was going with that thought, but
was it velocity being a bad measure?
maybe that's too easy. Chris, what else? We've covered all four. Do you have a secret fifth, Jason? Come on, pull one out.
Let's end with so for the record, please go back and read this post. It takes 5 minutes of your day, and it's a great there's some great takeaways with how to use these mantras in your change initiatives, right? There's whether you're stealing them for not, I mean, you do point out, Jason, like how to steal this for change in a positive way. Like you can take that if you want, or just like, I don't know, just use them at all, because clearly we're talking about things that haven't either not been used in a while, or they're not used in the way that they were originally intended to, much like many other things in our industry. So like, I mean, when you look at executives and they go, I read your post, like, so what am I supposed to do with this? Like, are you calling for a return to some of the old ways, or is it a deeper than just these mantras?
That specific post was more of informing people that these things exist, because much of what we're seeing with quote unquote agile plus change like has nothing to do with agility, right? It's people who've probably never worked on an agile team. They talk a lot about, I've seen so-called experts say agile's not just processes, it's also a mindset. I'm like, what the but you've got people going off and repeating these things. So it was, here's 4 things that exist that you can probably get value from, because every time you go into an organization and you think, well, I can't do that because you're the problem.
Right.
The organization is not the problem. And I've been there. I've been in organizations where I go, crap, this is never going to work. But that's all inside my head. So I know I'm the problem. I've got to figure something out to try to do this. And it doesn't mean it has to be like a permanent change or it's going to completely shake things up. But I need to figure out a way to try to use this in a way that's constructive for other people. So it's, for me, it was all down to the change agent, whether you're an agile coach or a change manager or whatever. You are making a personal choice to be a placater and appease the system, or you can choose to try to do something different that's actually going to do something meaningful. But it's your choice to make how you interact with that system. It's not the system's fault. It's not your boss's fault. It's how you are choosing to manage that interaction. So try these out. If they work, awesome. If they don't, you'll probably get fired, and then you can go find somewhere better to work.
On that note,
yeah, such a glass half full version.
Okay, here's a better one to close with. Sorry.
Okay.
You guys know Jerry Weinberg, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Jerry, AYE, which I've gone to a bunch of times. That's with Esther Derby, Johanna Rothman, Steve Smith, Don Gray, and Jerry. And he did a really good session on how to say no. And I think this was when he was really sick with cancer, and he just said, everybody, say no. He's talking in a microphone and it's still pretty low, and the whole group just says no. And he goes, what's so hard about that? Mm-hmm. And it was just such a strong lead into a conversation. And he told a story about being invited to talk to some enterprise company. They were going to give him an hour to kickstart their transformation or whatever it was. You're going to come in and do this awesome talk and inspire everybody to take action and transform. And he's like, I'd love to, but I don't know how to do that. And then he said the phone kind of went quiet for a bit, and they came back. Okay, we'll give you 2 hours. And still Jerry, being Jerry, is like, I'm sorry, I would really like to help you, but I don't know how to do that. And I don't think we do that a lot as change and agile people. We don't say, I don't know how to do that. We say, okay, I'll take your $10,000 for your keynote, and instead of walking away.
It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's one that I think we need more of. I continue to say, like, we don't have enough humility about our work, and because I'm not a world conqueror. Like, as much as I can have all the confidence in the room that you need. I can confidently advocate for ideas that I believe, but ultimately I am just one person trying to do my job of here to help you out. And if you're not interested, that's cool. It just means that I have to say it. My parents constantly are like, I don't understand why you apologize so much to your kids. I'm like, why didn't you apologize to me more? Like, why didn't you say I messed up? I was wrong. Like, I don't know why we don't say I don't, like, why can't we be wrong about something? What's so wrong with being incorrect? I don't get that. That doesn't seem to me like something we should be dying on as a hill. I don't know. Andy, save me.
Okay. That's the topic for another podcast. Bring your failures, right? Flaunt them, celebrate them, because they came with some learning. Part of the problem is, I think we're paid to show up as experts still, because that's what the system wants, and that's what they celebrate, rather than catalysts. And you don't always know what the reaction is going to be, because every system is a little bit different.
You guys should talk to Ken Rickard.
Okay.
He's got a really awesome relationship map, talks exactly about that. How when you show up as the expert, because what people expect, but he also talks about how you are perceived when you come in with that stance. And it's really cool and interesting stuff.
Ken Rickard. We'll look him up, see if we can have a chat. Well, Graham Puba of Lean Change, Jason Little, thank you so much for your time. Chris Murman, thank you for setting this all up. And to our listening audience, thanks for sticking around long enough to hear the closing remarks. If you like this episode, subscribe, leave a reaction. We read these things. If this is your first time listening, where the hell have you been? Join the discussion. Come on over to the Discord server. We've got a couple hundred active people. Bring your stories, bring your old school mantras, bring your new school mantras. And finally, support from listeners just like you. Keep the care and feeding of the podcast engine and the hosting and production going. So see the show notes for details on how to become a patron. And that's the point where we go cut.